Dean Halpern slammed his hand on the conference table and pointed directly at me. Maybe Diana should stick to admin work. Management's clearly too heavy for someone like her. 20 coworkers sat frozen around the table, some staring at their laptops, others exchanging uncomfortable glances. A few people actually laughed, nervous chuckles that felt like knives sliding between my ribs. My hands trembled beneath the table, gripping my pen so hard I thought it might snap. But I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled that professional smile I'd perfected over 3 years of abuse, nodded like a good employee, and took careful notes about the project deadlines he was assigning. Inside, though, something fundamental shifted. That night, lying awake in my small Austin apartment while my 8-year-old daughter slept peacefully in the next room, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to quit this time. I wasn't going to transfer departments or swallow another humiliation. I was going to fight back the only way that mattered, with evidence. The next morning, I ordered a recording device online with next-day delivery. Just before you continue to watch, Feminine Revenge would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage us to keep this streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. Alright, back to the story. The pen recorder arrived in discreet packaging, small enough to clip inside my blazer pocket without anyone noticing. I tested it 3 times before my first meeting, speaking into it softly in my car, playing back my own voice to make sure the audio quality was clear enough. My hands shook the first time I pressed record in an actual team huddle. Dean was going over quarterly targets, his voice carrying that condescending tone he reserved specifically for me, and I felt like everyone could somehow hear the tiny device capturing every word. But nobody noticed. Nobody ever looked at me closely enough to notice anything. That became my advantage. Over the next 2 weeks, I recorded every team meeting, every one-on-one check-in, every hallway conversation where Dean casually undermined my work in front of colleagues. He started twisting my words more frequently, blaming me for missed deadlines I had no control over, telling the team I was dropping balls when he deliberately excluded me from critical email chains. Each time he lied, I saved a new audio file, labeling it carefully by date and topic. My collection grew. What I captured next would prove he wasn't just a terrible boss, he was a criminal. Dean perfected the art of gaslighting like some people perfected golf swings. He'd call me into his corner office, close the blinds with deliberate slowness, and gesture for me to sit in the chair positioned lower than his desk. "Diana, I'm concerned about your perception of things lately," he'd say, leaning back in his expensive leather chair with his fingers steepled. "You seem to think I'm being unfair, but honestly, no one else on the team shares that view. Maybe you're taking things too personally? Women sometimes do that in high-pressure environments." He'd smile that patronizing smile, the one that made my stomach turn, and I'd force myself to nod and thank him for his feedback. But now everything was different. Now I had proof of every insult, every manipulation, every lie recorded in crystal-clear audio. I kept my face calm and receptive during these meetings, but inside I was writing a detailed mental script for his eventual downfall. I started noticing other patterns too, how he'd schedule important client calls when I was out of the office, then blame me for not being present. How he'd edit my reports before submitting them to upper management, removing my name and adding his own. How he'd consistently take credit for my ideas in executive meetings. I documented everything meticulously. Then I stumbled onto something much bigger than workplace harassment. During a quarterly budget review meeting in late September, I noticed something odd in the project allocation spreadsheet Dean was presenting. There was a line item for vendor consulting services showing $47,000 in expenses, but I'd managed that project personally and knew we'd only approved $31,000. I raised my hand politely and asked about the discrepancy. Dean barely glanced at the screen before dismissing it. "That's just accounting noise, Diana. Finance reconciles these things monthly. Don't worry about details that aren't in your wheelhouse." Several people nodded, accepting his explanation without question, and the meeting moved on. But I'd been managing project budgets for 6 years. I knew the difference between accounting reconciliation and unexplained $16,000 gaps. That night, after putting my daughter to bed and reading her favorite story about a brave princess who saved herself, I drove back to the office. The building was nearly empty, just security guards and a few engineers working late in the basement server room. I logged into the project archive system and started printing every version of that quarterly report from the past 18 months. The printer hummed quietly in the dark office, spitting out page after page of budget documents. When I compared them side by side at home, my hands started shaking. One of the earliest versions showed the accurate $31,000 figure, but someone had edited the final version, adding phantom expenses. The digital signature at the bottom of the altered document belonged to Dean Halpern. The next morning, I arrived at work 30 minutes early, like always, grabbed my usual coffee from the break room, and sat down at my desk to check emails. But when I tried to log into the company system, my password failed. I tried again, typing carefully. Access denied. A cold sensation spread through my chest. I walked quickly to the IT help desk on the second floor, trying to keep my expression neutral. The technician, a young guy named Marcus who'd always been friendly, looked genuinely confused when he checked my account. "That's weird," he said, scrolling through system logs. "Your password was reset yesterday at 4:47 p.m. The request came through your manager's authorization."
Dean.
I thanked Marcus calmly and headed toward the executive corridor, my heart pounding. Dean was standing near the coffee station, laughing with two other department heads. When he saw me approaching, something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, maybe, or challenge. "Morning, Diana," he said smoothly. "Everything okay? You look stressed." I forced a smile. "Just a password issue. IT's handling it." He nodded slowly, that smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's time for you to take a break. You've seemed overwhelmed lately." That was when I fully understood. He knew I was getting close to something. The lockout wasn't random. It was a warning shot. I wasn't just fighting a bad boss anymore. I was in an actual war. I spent my lunch break in my car, not eating, just thinking strategically. Dean had made a critical mistake by showing his hand too early. Now I knew he was watching me, which meant I needed to be smarter than ever. That afternoon, I used my personal laptop to access the company cloud system through the employee portal and systematically downloaded every document I'd collected. Budget reports, project timelines, email threads, performance reviews. Everything went into an encrypted cloud storage account I'd created specifically for this purpose. I uploaded all 23 audio recordings, carefully organized by date and labeled with brief descriptions of content. Each file name started with a timestamp, followed by keywords like credit theft, gaslighting session, or budget discrepancy discussion. I backed up the entire archive to 3 separate locations: cloud storage, an external hard drive hidden in my apartment, and a thumb drive I kept in my purse at all times. Each night that week, after tucking my daughter into bed and listening to her breathing settle into sleep, I worked in the dim glow of my laptop screen, building my case piece by piece, brick by brick. I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had transformed into something sharper and more useful: determination. I was building something that couldn't be dismissed or gaslit away. I was building his ending. The day came sooner than I expected when Dean tried to fire me, and he chose to do it as publicly as possible. Dean scheduled what he called a performance review meeting for 2 p.m. on a Thursday, sending the calendar invitation with HR Director Patricia Moss included as an attendee. My stomach dropped when I saw her name on the invite. This wasn't a regular check-in. This was an ambush. I arrived 5 minutes early to the conference room on the executive floor, carrying only a legal pad and my phone. Dean and Patricia were already seated, a manila folder thick with papers positioned in front of Dean. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. For 20 straight minutes, he delivered a devastating performance review, accusing me of missing deadlines, creating conflict with team members, undermining his leadership decisions, and fostering what he called a hostile work environment through constant questioning of legitimate business practices. He spoke in that measured, reasonable tone that made everything sound factual and objective. Patricia took notes, her expression professionally neutral. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, and let him talk. I let him dig his own grave with every false accusation, every fabricated example, Every lie he was confident I couldn't disprove. When he finally finished, he leaned back with that satisfied expression and said, "Do you have anything you'd like to say in your defense, Diana?" I looked at him for a long moment, then at Patricia, then back to Dean. "Actually, yes," I said quietly. "Would you like me to play back what really happened in all those situations you just described?" Dean's face went completely still. The color drained from his cheeks. "What?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the voice memo app where I'd transferred my most damning recordings, and selected the file from September 14th. Dean's own voice filled the conference room, crystal clear and unmistakable. "She's too emotional for real leadership positions. Women like Diana are useful for detailed work, but they don't have the stomach for executive decisions. We'll phase her out quietly over the next quarter, bring in someone with a stronger presence." There was a pause in the recording, then his director colleague's voice responding. "Are you sure? She's been getting good results." Dean's laugh. "Results don't matter if you can't command respect. Trust me, I'll handle it." Patricia Moss's jaw actually dropped open. She stared at my phone, then at Dean, then back at my phone like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Dean lurched forward, his face suddenly red with fury. "That's illegal. You can't record me without my knowledge. That's a violation of—" I cut him off, my voice steady and calm. "Actually, Dean, Texas is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows recording is happening, it's completely legal. I was that person. Would you like to hear the recording from September 28th, where you discussed altering the Meridian project budget? Or maybe the one from October 6th, where you told Kyle that women my age get difficult when they're going through hormonal changes?" His mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Patricia cleared her throat, her professional mask firmly back in place. "Diana, I think we need you to step outside while I discuss some things with Dean privately." I stood up, collecting my phone and legal pad with careful dignity. "Of course. I'll be at my desk." As I walked out, I heard Dean's voice rising behind the closed door, panicked and angry, already making excuses. Patricia called me 2 hours later and asked me to come to her office. When I arrived, she was alone, the manila folder from the meeting sitting closed on her desk. She gestured for me to sit and folded her hands in front of her, clearly choosing her words carefully. "Diana, given the serious allegations that have come to light today and the complexity of the situation, I think it's best if you take a week of paid administrative leave while we conduct a thorough investigation into the matters discussed in that meeting." I'd expected this. Companies always protected themselves first, and giving Dean time to clean up his mess while I was conveniently off-site was standard corporate playbook. But I wasn't the same naive employee who'd been humiliated 3 months ago. "I understand," I said neutrally. "I'll need you to leave your laptop and building access card with security, and please don't discuss this matter with any current employees during the investigation period." Translation: they were isolating me while they figured out damage control. I agreed to everything with perfect professional courtesy. That night, sitting at my kitchen table after my daughter had gone to bed, I opened my laptop and stared at the folder containing all my evidence. Taking me out of the building had been their first mistake. They'd just given me time and distance to build an even stronger case from the outside. I picked up my phone and called someone I'd been hoping I wouldn't need, my college roommate Melissa, who now worked as a forensic accountant for the Texas State Auditor's Office. Melissa met me for coffee on Saturday morning at a quiet place near the university campus, far from anyone who might recognize us. I'd known her for 15 years, trusted her completely, and she'd seen enough corporate fraud cases to recognize the real thing when she saw it. I brought my laptop and walked her through everything: the altered budget documents, the missing $47,000, the pattern of expense manipulation across multiple projects, and Dean's digital signatures on the falsified reports. She studied the spreadsheets with a focused intensity one remembered from our college study sessions, occasionally making notes on her legal pad. When she finally looked up, her expression was grave. "Diana, this isn't just office politics or a hostile work environment case. What you're showing me is textbook embezzlement. If these budget alterations are real, and you can prove they weren't authorized through proper channels, Dean has been systematically stealing from your company for at least 18 months. Maybe longer. My hands were shaking as I held my coffee cup. Hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way that terrified me. What do I do? Melissa was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking through the implications. You need to be very careful. If Dean realizes you have this evidence, he might do more than just fire you. People facing felony charges do unpredictable things. But if you want to pursue this, I can tell you exactly what steps to take. She pulled out a business card and wrote a name and number on the back. This is someone I trust in the Travis County District Attorney's office. But Diana, once you go down this road, there's no turning back. I spent the administrative leave week acting completely normal, posting cheerful pictures with my daughter at the park on social media, responding to a few work emails with professional courtesy, giving no indication that anything was wrong. Dean must have been watching my online presence, because on Wednesday, he sent me a friendly text message. Hope you're enjoying your break, Diana. Sometimes stepping away gives us perspective on things. Looking forward to working this out when you return. The false kindness made my skin crawl. He was trying to gauge whether I was going to be a problem or quietly accept whatever settlement HR was preparing. I responded with equal fake warmth. Thanks, Dean. Taking time to reflect has been really valuable. See you next week. But that night, something unexpected happened. I received an anonymous email to my personal account with the subject line, "You're not alone." The message was brief and unsigned. My name is Claire. I worked at your company until 2 years ago. Dean Halpern destroyed my career the same way he's trying to destroy yours. If you're willing to fight back, I have information that might help. He's done this before. You're not the first woman he's targeted. My hands trembled as I read it 3 times. There was a phone number at the bottom. I sat staring at my laptop screen for 10 minutes, weighing the risk of responding against the potential value of finding an ally who understood exactly what I was facing. Finally, I picked up my phone and dialed the number. A woman's voice answered on the second ring. Diana? Claire and I talked for 2 hours that first night, our experiences overlapping in disturbing ways. She'd been a senior analyst at the company, hired 3 years before me with an impressive background in data systems. Dean had been her direct supervisor, and for the first 6 months, everything had seemed fine. Then she'd caught him manipulating client billing records, adding phantom consulting hours to inflate departmental revenue numbers. When she'd questioned the discrepancies privately, Dean had started the same pattern of gaslighting, credit theft, and public humiliation I'd experienced. But when Claire had finally gone to HR with her concerns, Dean had turned the tables completely, accusing her of being the one falsifying records to cover her own performance issues. He'd built such a convincing case against her that she'd been terminated for cause, losing not just her job but her reputation. She'd been blacklisted in the Austin tech community, unable to get interviews at other companies because Dean had spread rumors about her ethical violations. She'd eventually moved to San Antonio and rebuilt her career from scratch, but the experience had left scars. I should have fought harder, she said, her voice tight with old anger. But I was alone, and he had the entire company backing him. You have something I didn't, evidence before they could spin the narrative. The next day, she sent me a zip file containing screenshots of text messages from her time at the company. Messages where Dean had bragged to another manager about handling the Claire situation. Messages where he'd joked about creative accounting. Messages that proved he'd been running this same playbook for years. I stared at my screen, feeling sick but also validated. This wasn't about me being too sensitive or misunderstanding his intentions. This was a pattern of predatory behavior. Over the weekend, Claire and I met in person at a park halfway between Austin and San Antonio. She brought a laptop and a thick folder of printed documents, everything she'd saved from her employment. We sat at a picnic table while my daughter played on the swings nearby, and Claire walked me through her evidence. There were hundreds of screenshots, meticulously organized by date and category. Text messages where Dean had discussed managing difficult women. Emails where he'd coordinated with HR to build termination cases against female employees who questioned his decisions. Budget reports showing the same pattern of phantom expenses I discovered, dating back 4 years. He's been doing this the entire time he's been at the company, Claire said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. And he gets away with it because he's charismatic with executives, brings in good client numbers, and knows exactly how to position women as the problem instead of himself. She showed me one particularly damaging screenshot, a WhatsApp conversation between Dean and someone labeled Brian K., where Dean had written, "Another one bites the dust." She thought she could outsmart me with her data analysis. Had HR convinced she was falsifying reports within 3 weeks. Never underestimate the power of documentation and a sympathetic narrative. I felt cold reading it. This wasn't just workplace harassment. This was calculated, strategic destruction of women's careers as sport. Claire leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Diana, I never had enough evidence to take him down. But you do. You have recordings, budget documents, my testimony about his pattern of behavior. If we work together, we can make sure he never does this to another woman." I looked at my daughter, laughing as she went down the slide, completely unaware her mother was planning to take down a corporate predator. I thought about every woman who'd come after me if I did nothing. I made my decision. Back at work after my administrative leave, I acted like a model employee. I thanked Patricia for the opportunity to reflect, told Dean I appreciated his patience during a stressful time, and returned to my projects with professional focus. But I was working 2 jobs now, my official position and my secret investigation. During lunch breaks, I'd sit in my car and review files. After my daughter went to sleep, I'd organize evidence and coordinate with Claire. We needed one more piece to make the case bulletproof. Someone inside the company who could verify Dean's access to the systems where budget documents were altered. That's when I remembered something odd I'd noticed weeks ago. During a server migration, I'd seen an IT notification about archived files being moved to new storage. The notice had mentioned that certain executive-level users had private folders that wouldn't be included in the standard migration. Why would Dean need private server space separate from normal company storage? I dismissed it at the time, but now it seemed significant. I needed to talk to someone in IT, someone who might have noticed the same red flags I had but been too afraid to speak up. I started paying attention to the IT staff during my coffee breaks, watching who seemed nervous around Dean, who avoided him in the hallways. That's when I noticed Jason Tucker, a senior systems administrator who practically sprinted in the opposite direction whenever Dean approached. One afternoon, I deliberately took my coffee break at the same time as Jason, positioning myself near him at the counter where the sugar and cream were arranged. "Crazy week, huh?" I said casually, stirring my coffee. He glanced at me, cautious. "Yeah." I lowered my voice. "Can I ask you something off the record? About the server migration last month?" His body language shifted immediately, shoulders tensing, eyes darting toward the door. I noticed something strange in the executive folder logs. Someone with access to archived files. "You saw something too, didn't you?" He stared at his coffee cup for a long moment. Finally, he whispered, "If I help you, will you protect me? I can't lose this job." Jason and I met in a parking garage 3 blocks from the office at 6:30 the next morning, early enough that no one from work would see us. He looked exhausted and terrified, clutching a thumb drive like it was a live grenade. "I could go to prison for this," he said immediately. "Taking data from company servers, even if it's evidence of crimes, violates like 15 different IT policies. If this goes wrong, I'm the one who—" I cut him off gently but firmly. "Jason, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. What's on that drive?" He handed it to me with shaking hands. "Dean has a private server partition that's not part of regular company storage. Most executives don't even know it exists. It's old infrastructure from before the last IT overhaul, kept running for exactly one reason. He needed somewhere to store things he didn't want in official systems. I found it during the migration when I was checking for orphan data." I plugged the thumb drive into my laptop right there in my car, Jason watching nervously through my passenger window. Inside were dozens of folders containing archived chat logs from the company's old internal messaging system. Messages that should have been deleted years ago but had been deliberately preserved in Dean's private storage. I clicked on one folder labeled Vendor Communications. Inside were months of conversations between Dean and someone named Victor Castillo, identified as a supplier for a logistics company the firm had used on several projects. The messages made my stomach turn. Dean to Victor: add 15% to the next invoice. I'll approve it through without budget review. Split the difference. Victor to Dean: same account as last time? Dean to Victor: yes. And make sure the itemization looks legitimate. Spread it across multiple line items. This was direct evidence of kickback fraud. Dean wasn't just inflating budgets. He was colluding with vendors to create fake invoices, approving inflated payments, and receiving money back under the table. I looked at Jason through the window. How much of this is there? He swallowed hard. 4 years' worth. Maybe more. That night, I called Melissa again and sent her everything: the chat logs, the budget documents, Claire's testimony, my recordings, all of it compiled into one comprehensive folder I labeled Final Evidence Package. She called me back within 2 hours, her voice urgent and professional. Diana, this is federal wire fraud territory. The amounts involved cross the threshold for major felony charges. You need to file an official whistleblower complaint, and you need to do it through the proper channels so you're protected. She walked me through the process step by step. The Texas State Attorney General's office had a whistleblower division specifically designed to handle corporate fraud cases. I could file anonymously initially, and if the case went forward, I'd be protected under whistleblower protection laws that made it illegal for the company to retaliate against me. We spent 3 hours on the phone that night, organizing the evidence into a format that prosecutors could use. Claire joined the call and provided her sworn statement about Dean's pattern of behavior and her own termination. Jason, terrified but committed, agreed to provide technical testimony about the private server and how the chat logs proved Dean had deliberately hidden evidence of fraud. By midnight, we had a document package that was nearly 200 pages long, with audio files, financial records, chat logs, and witness statements all cross-referenced and indexed. Melissa submitted it through the Attorney General's secure portal at 2:17 a.m. on November 3rd, marked urgent and flagged for the Fraud Investigation Division. The confirmation email said we'd hear back within 72 hours if the case had sufficient merit for investigation. I barely slept for the next 3 days, jumping every time my phone buzzed, constantly checking my encrypted email for updates. On November 6th at 9:43 in the morning, I received a message from an investigator named William Hayes. Your complaint has been reviewed and forwarded to federal authorities. The FBI's White-Collar Crime Division will be conducting the investigation. Please do not discuss this matter with anyone at your workplace. Formal proceedings will begin within 1 week. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. This was real. This was actually happening. The federal agents arrived at 10:15 a.m. on November 14th, a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. I was at my desk reviewing project timelines when I heard urgent voices near the executive corridor. People started standing up from their cubicles, craning their necks to see what was happening. 3 agents in dark suits with FBI credentials were walking through the office with building security, heading directly toward Dean's corner office. Everyone in the open workspace stopped working, watching in frozen silence as one agent knocked on Dean's glass door while the other 2 positioned themselves outside. Through the glass wall, I could see Dean look up from his computer, confused at first, then alarmed as the agents entered and closed the door behind them. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. Then Dean stood up, his face drained of all color, and the agents escorted him out of his office. He wasn't handcuffed, but everyone understood immediately that something catastrophic had just happened to Dean Halpern's perfect corporate existence. As they walked past my desk toward the elevators, Dean's eyes swept across the office space. When they landed on me, he stopped walking for just a second, his expression transforming from shock to pure hatred. The lead agent touched his elbow, redirecting him forward, but Dean kept staring at me as they moved away. His lips formed one silent word. You. I held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to show any emotion except calm professional neutrality. The elevator doors closed on his furious face. The office erupted into chaos within seconds. People pulling out phones, gathering in small groups, voices rising with speculation and shock. My desk phone started ringing immediately as colleagues messaged asking if I knew what was happening. I ignored all of it, focusing on my computer screen like nothing unusual had occurred, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The company went into full crisis management mode within hours. The CEO sent an all-staff email announcing that Dean Halpern had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation into serious allegations regarding financial irregularities. They carefully avoided saying the FBI had arrested him, focusing instead on how the company was cooperating fully with authorities and remained committed to the highest ethical standards. It was corporate spin at its finest, distancing themselves from Dean while pretending they'd had no idea what was happening. Over the next 2 weeks, more details emerged. The FBI had seized Dean's work computer, his personal laptop, his phone records, and files from his home office. According to the rumors circulating through the office, they'd also frozen several of his bank accounts and were interviewing vendors and clients about billing practices on projects Dean had managed. Claire called me almost daily with updates she was getting from a source in the DA's office. They traced almost $300,000 in fraudulent payments over 4 years, with evidence of kickbacks from multiple vendors. The chat logs Jason had provided were the smoking gun that tied everything together. But I wasn't celebrating yet. The company was still treating this as Dean's individual misconduct, rather than examining the systems that had allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. And I was still just Diana Brooks, the project manager who'd been mysteriously on leave when all this exploded. Then Patricia called me into her office for a private meeting. When I arrived, the CEO, Marcus Brennan, was there too, along with the company's general counsel. My stomach dropped. This was either very good or very bad, and I had no idea which. Marcus gestured for me to sit, his expression carefully neutral. Diana, we owe you an extraordinary debt of gratitude. They offered me a settlement package right there in that conference room, 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, a glowing reference letter, and a mutual non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from discussing Dean's misconduct or the company's role in enabling it. The general counsel slid the paperwork across the table with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. We want to thank you for bringing these serious issues to light, and we recognize that this has been an incredibly difficult time for you, Marcus said smoothly. This package reflects our appreciation and our commitment to supporting employees who demonstrate integrity. I looked at the settlement offer, at the number that represented more money than I'd seen in months of regular paychecks. They were offering me enough to be comfortable, to walk away quietly, to let them control the narrative about what had happened. Hush money, dressed up as gratitude. I set the papers down carefully and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in a settlement or a non-disclosure agreement. You could have heard a pin drop in that conference room. Patricia shifted in her seat uncomfortably. The general counsel's professional smile flickered. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Diana, I'm not sure you understand the generosity of this package. 6 months' salary is well beyond. I cut him off politely, but firmly. I understand exactly what you're offering, Marcus. You're offering me money to go away quietly so the company can pretend this was one bad actor rather than a systemic failure of oversight, accountability, and protection for employees who report misconduct. I'm not interested. The general counsel cleared her throat. What exactly are you interested in, Ms. Brooks? I'd been preparing for this moment for 2 weeks, planning my move carefully with Claire and Melissa. I want Dean's position. Senior Director of Operations. Same salary he was making, same authority, same office. You could see the shock register on all 3 faces simultaneously. There was a long, uncomfortable silence in the conference room. The general counsel actually laughed, a short, incredulous sound quickly stifled. Marcus studied me like he was seeing me for the first time, recalculating everything he thought he knew about quiet, manageable Diana Brooks. That's a very senior position, he said carefully. One that requires extensive executive experience and… I didn't let him finish the excuse. Dean had that position for 4 years while embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, sexually harassing female employees, and systematically destroying careers to cover his crimes. I think the bar for qualification isn't as high as you're suggesting. Patricia actually winced. I continued, my voice steady. I have 6 years of exceptional project management experience. I've successfully led teams on every major initiative this company has undertaken in the past 3 years, and I've demonstrated better judgment and integrity than the man you promoted to executive leadership. What I'm asking for isn't unreasonable. It's overdue. Marcus exchanged glances with the general counsel. They were in an impossible position. They couldn't afford to have me walk away and potentially talk to reporters about how the company had tried to buy my silence after I'd exposed massive fraud. But they also clearly hadn't expected me to demand a C-suite position. "We'll need to discuss this," Marcus said finally. "Give us 48 hours to consider your request." I stood up, leaving the settlement papers on the table. "You have 24. If I don't hear from you by noon tomorrow, I'll be calling the reporters who've been leaving messages on my voicemail asking for comment about the FBI investigation." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, my hands steady, feeling more powerful than I'd felt in 3 years. At noon the next day, they called to tell me the position was mine. My promotion to Senior Director of Operations was announced in a carefully worded company email that praised my dedication, integrity, and leadership during a challenging period of transition. They gave me Dean's corner office, though I insisted on having it completely redecorated first. New furniture, different paint colors, every trace of his presence removed and replaced. On my first official day in the new position, I called an all-hands meeting with my entire department. 47 people crowded into the main conference room, curious and nervous about what I'd say. Some of them had laughed when Dean humiliated me months ago. Some had stood by silently while he destroyed my credibility. Some had been victims themselves, too afraid to speak up. I stood at the front of the room and spoke clearly. "I want to start by acknowledging that this department has been through trauma. Many of you witnessed unethical behavior and didn't feel safe reporting it. Some of you were targets of harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. That ends today. My first priority is establishing a culture of actual accountability and transparency." I outlined new policies I'd spent 2 weeks developing with HR, mandatory ethics training, anonymous reporting systems with real protections, regular audits of financial processes, and zero-tolerance policies for harassment of any kind. "These aren't just words in an employee handbook," I said. "They're commitments I will enforce personally. If anyone in this department experiences retaliation for reporting problems, you come directly to me. If anyone sees unethical behavior, you have multiple channels to report it safely. We're going to rebuild trust, but it starts with me proving I mean what I say." The meeting ended with cautious applause. I knew it would take time to fully repair the damage Dean had caused, but I was committed to trying. That night, exhausted but satisfied, I came home to find an email waiting in my personal account. The sender was Amanda Halpern, Dean's wife. I stared at the email for a full minute before opening it, my cursor hovering over the subject line. "Thank you." My first instinct was to delete it. What could Dean's wife possibly have to say to me except accusations or anger? But curiosity won. I clicked. The message was short and raw. "Diana, you don't know me, but I need you to know something. What you did, exposing my husband's crimes, saved my children and me from a life built on lies I didn't know existed. Dean told me we had successful investments. He told me his bonuses were performance-based. He told me everything was fine while he was stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars and destroying women's careers to cover his tracks. When the FBI showed up at our house with search warrants, I learned the truth about who I'd been married to for 16 years. Our savings were gone, spent on his secret apartment and gambling debts I never knew about. Our house might be seized as proceeds of fraud. Everything I thought was real was a lie. But the worst part was learning what he'd done to you and the others. I found messages on his seized laptop where he bragged about managing difficult women like it was a game. I'm divorcing him. I'm cooperating with prosecutors. And I'm telling our 2 daughters the truth about their father so they never mistake cruelty for strength. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. You didn't just stop Dean. You freed everyone trapped in his web of lies." I read the message 3 times, tears streaming down my face. I'd expected justice to feel triumphant, like a victory I could celebrate. Instead, it felt complicated and sad and necessary. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Feminine Revenge has got more thrilling stories for you.